it's there are many. So when we talk about the Bamboula, the legacy in the Virgin Islands of those that know of the Bamboula, many of the families that know don't even want anyone to know that they know, because it was shunned. It was made illegal. People were in prison. People lost limbs. Some may have lost their lives for doing these drumming rhythms, dances around fire in the forest. It was perceived as Satan worship. It was perceived as something demonic, and that if you were a good enslaved African, you wouldn't do those things. You would only do that which is holy or upright, in the context of an enslavement society that was committing genocide and destroying the very fabric of the humanity of enslaved Africans. So when you speak of the legacy, some of the families are the Matthias family, and that's particularly in St. John. Some have gone through, St. Thomas, St. Croix as well, Tortola, through the British Virgin Islands, Jos Van Dyke, Anegada, as far Virgin Gorda. There's a large legacy of those traditional bearers, those cultural tradition bearers, rather, that are legacy keepers of the Bamboula tradition. You have Marianne Christopher, and I'm kind of jumping, because when I speak of Matthias, then I would go to Christopher, I would have to go to George's, I would need to speak of the Donovan. I'm speaking of family names because it was not only the women that knew this is Bamboula Queens, but we had master drummers that knew the rhythms. They knew how to make the drums out of these barrels, from the old sugar rum factory barrels, and they would produce these phenomenal percussion instruments. And so you have a drum that is it's like a quote unquote like a big barrel, and it is equivalent to some in terms of the bass sound, but that keeps the tone for the whole boom, 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 boom. It kind of keeps it together when you're doing that type of a rhythm. And we started to, and when I say we, I'm speaking of in terms of the research that I've been engaged in, with Parent Og, some of the work that I've done in teaching at the University of the Virgin Islands, and also in terms of the direction around the Virgin Islands Caribbean Cultural Center at UVI. It has expanded some of my writings so I can speak to these families that were instrumental to maintaining that tradition over a course of time. So many of the things that we learned from Mrs. Sanderson, many of the things that we learned from Miss McIntosh, they may have sung it first and then showed us the movement that went with that lyric or that sound, that song, and then teach that to the drummer, so that there was like 3 different layers of comprehension and engagement on sustaining this tradition that many people didn't permit. For example, in the church, it wasn't permissible. It was seen as over-sexualized. Even in literature, they refer to the Bamboula as like a gyrating movements that are spastic and demonic or diabolical in focus. And it's not seen as energetic dance that is spiritually centered and connected to the One Most High. It's amazing that it goes from something very sacred to something evil beyond anything positive that could be secular. So these families were able to sustain that, and in many instances as an underground. I mean, there's certain elders that I speak to now about the Bamboula. Oh, I know about that, but I don't want to talk about that. And you'll hear that on it's not infrequent that you'll hear that. They're more comfortable because quadrille, which is a very light, more waltzy, they actually do the waltz type of dance step style, is based on some of the same postures and gestures of the Bamboula. It's just more acceptable and more sanitized and more conservative, if you will. And we have those families. I come forth to Marianne Christopher because she was one of the long-standing Bamboula queens from St. Croix, but had made St. Thomas her home for more than 35, probably close to 40 years. And with the MacIslin Bamboula Dance Company and with the Joseph Gomez School Bamboula company, from back in the 80s. She sustained a constant core of teaching, and she reinforced it. So we have some generations, at least going on 3 generations of Bamboula dancers that have been exposed to the songs and the music and the history and the communicative component of the Bamboula through the legacy of Marianne Christopher. And she had the honor and privilege of working around greats like Gina Sanderson. There are persons like Leona Brady Watson, who was instrumental to teaching us not only the music, the lyrics, the songs, the history, the accurate history, pulling archives as a multi-generational Virgin Islander. And she, again, developed a generation-long legacy of persons that are knowledgeable of what the Bamboula is, and that it wasn't just celebratory. It was the dance of resistance. It was the dance of liberation. And that was one of the reasons that it was banned as well. So those are some of the families that I would focus on. I know some of the Joseph families members, they were very familiar with some of these traditions as well around the Bamboula. And it's not necessarily family specific. It's just that there are certain persons. I mean, at this point, I get the honor and privilege of including my own family name, Davis, Tomas, as well as Kahina, because what Parent Ankh Bamboula dancers and drummers have been able to do is we've created a interpretive form. We've gone as far as to look at documents from Central Africa, West Africa, different parts of the Caribbean, and see the similarities and see what is the thread of expression around the Bamboula tradition. And we've been able to sustain that for well over 20 years. And we're working to be able to get it so that it's something that is respected and that is given the same credence and value and rightful place of dignity, honor, and respect as Quelbe music is in the Virgin Islands, as quadrille dances in the Virgin Islands, as ballet dances in Dominica, as tambula dances in Haiti, and so as bomba plena dances in Puerto Rico, as cocolo dances in the Dominican Republic, because that's deserving of the indigenous, ancestral, native African culture here in the Virgin Islands.